Good evening from Washington, D.C. I'm Paul Kincaid, Director of Congressional Outreach for FMC, the Association of Former Members of Congress. I'd like to welcome all of you to this special discussion, part of our conference series sponsored by the Korean Society. Today, we'll be discussing South Korea's Green New Deal and how the Republic of Korea and the United States can work together to address important environmental challenges on our planet. This is an interactive discussion today, so if you have a question at any time, simply click the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, fill out your name and your question, and if we choose you, our moderator will call on you to ask your question over audio only to the panel. Again, anytime during the call today, simply click the Q&A button at the bottom center of your Zoom screen. We have a great moderator who will introduce our panel and our discussion tonight. From the board of FMC, I'd like to welcome former Congressman Peter Roskam of Illinois. Thank you for spending your early evening with us, Congressman. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Paul. And it's a real joy for me to be with you today and to have our two special guests. Before I introduce our guests, I want to make a special thank you to the Korea Society and the Korea Foundation, who have been generous and magnanimous in creating the funds for this series of conferences that we're having. And this is one of four in a series. The next conference will be tomorrow, December 1st at 2 p.m. 2 p.m. Eastern, which will focus on the U.S. ROK relationship moving forward. But now let me introduce our two panelists who are experts in the subject that we're covering this evening. Director General Chung has been serving as the Director General for Climate Change, Energy, and Environment and Scientific Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs since September of 2019. And prior to that, he served in several roles, including Minister Counselor to the Korean Embassy of the U.S., where he met many members of Congress, including yours truly, and Director of Government's Global Green Solution Institute in Seoul. He earned an LLB at Seoul National University College of Law and a JD from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. And he's joined by Alan Yu, who is at the Center for American Progress, where he's a senior fellow and director of international climate and energy policy. He focuses attention on U.S. climate diplomacy and technical engagement for the whole globe, and as such, with our key counterparts as China, India, and the European Union. He served in the Obama administration at the Department of Energy as Director for Asian Affairs, where he coordinated the efforts and resources of the full range of the DOE's senior leadership, technical offices, and national labs, and to assure a unified strategy in U.S. energy policy. And he's also a foreign service officer. So both of these men have an incredible background to weigh in on today. So Director General, let's start with you from your perspective. You're joining us from Seoul today. So thank you so much, and for opening up your office in the Foreign Ministry. Give us a sense of where you think the environmental challenges are today, and where is there overlap, as somebody who knows the U.S. as well as you do, and who knows Korea, obviously, as well as you do. What do you think?
Well, thank you very much, Congressman Roskam, for the kind introduction. Well, I am not too sure that I can call myself an expert, but I've been in my position and dealing with this energy and climate change and environmental issue for over a year. I may have something to say. Well, first of all, please allow me to express my gratitude to the Congressional Study Group of Korea and the former member of Congress and inviting me to this meaningful event. And I must acknowledge that while serving in the Korean Embassy back in 2015 as a minister counselor and a chief of the congressional section, I made a report back to the headquarters to establish the CSGK, looking at similar arrangements Turkey and Japan had with the US Congress at that time. I understand that since its establishment in 2018, CSGK has been instrumental in enhancing the understanding of the US Congress and Korea and facilitating the communication between the relevant authorities from both the US and Korea. It is also a great pleasure to take part in this conversation with very two learned Koreophiles, former Congressman Peter Roskam and also Mr. Alan Yu, with extensive experience in engaging in bilateral relations with Korea and the United States. As we continue to face challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have finally seen a glimmer of hope with the news of vaccines. We should note, however, that this fight against COVID-19 may have just be a prelude to what we may need to face with the climate crisis. And there are neither personal or protective equipment nor vaccines for climate change. As Pope Francis has said, God always forgives. We men sometimes forgive, but nature never forgives. The international community has never played down climate change, but we used to believe that there would be more time for us to prepare. However, we are experiencing the stark realities of climate change more frequently than ever before. Natural disasters and climate abnormalities such as typhoons, flood and wildfire, not to mention the ice melting in the Arctic, have all become a new normal. And it makes us worry that the climate crisis is really just around the corner. I believe this is reason why so-called the green issues have become a high priority issue globally and political agenda domestically. The challenges posed by climate change have no respect for boundaries, and the sustainability of our planet cannot be assured by efforts of a single country. For this reason, the combined efforts and approach of the international community are most needed. Our strong commitment to tackle climate change was reinforced when President Moon Jae-in of Korea announced our aim for carbon neutrality by 2050 last October. The Korean government is taking initial steps with the implementation of the Green New Deal to align our recovery policy measures with long-term climate ambition. According to the recent report of International Energy Agency, a key aspect of Korea's Green New Deal is the decarbonization of the industry sector and decoupling of sector's energy consumption from its economic activity, all the while maintaining the country's strong industrial export base. The appointment of former Secretary of State John Kerry as the presidential climate envoy shows how serious the President-elect Joe Biden is about climate change issues, and the international community is anticipating a stronger U.S. leadership on this agenda as we approach the first year of the Paris Agreement implementation. Based on the time-tested solid alliance and common values that we share as vibrant democracies, there are numerous opportunities ahead. First is making joint efforts to be ambitious in greening our recovery and setting our climate action goals. Second could be laying groundwork for the private sector actors to collaborate in the new market with strong appetite for renewable energy, green mobility, batteries, and smart city. We'll have to see how the new US government rolls out its plan in the area, but Korea is certainly eager to work very closely with the United States.
Thank you. Alan, what do you think? Look at the US Korea relationship in particular, and if you could give us a framework around that, I think that would be a helpful entree for the rest of our conversation this evening.
Sure. No, thank you. Thank you very much, Congressman Roskam, and of course, very happy to be on a panel today with Director General Chung. And let me just start by saying, expressing my gratitude to the former members of Congress organization, as well as the Korea Society and Korea Foundation for inviting me to participate in this. I was, when I got the invitation, I was very excited to join. Mainly, one of the main reasons is, as Congressman Roskam mentioned, previous to my time at CAP, I served for many years in the US government and spent a lot of that time focused on US relations with our friends and allies in Asia. And Korea has always played a very, kind of important and warm part of my professional engagement on policy issues. So very happy to kind of have that opportunity again. So thank you for giving me the platform for doing so. Let me just start a little bit with kind of reaffirming a number of topics that Director General Chung raised as we talk about the environmental challenges, because I think we are in a very concerning stage. I don't want to sound pessimistic. I think there's still opportunity for us to limit the worst effects of climate change and to actually come out hopefully in a sustainable way and a good future for our children and our grandchildren. But we are at, I think, a key period now as we kind of look at the science of climate. In the lead up to 2015 in Paris, we were all kind of making plans and considering policy actions based on this idea that we could get to, if we limited temperature rise to 2 degrees, we would be in an okay place. But then, a year later, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, excuse me, the scientific organization that analyzes these issues, came out with a report called the 1.5 degree report that basically said, hey, sorry, you got it wrong in Paris. 2 degrees isn't going to be good enough. We have to do 1.5. And so that changed the whole equation, both in just kind of how countries needed to think about what they needed to do themselves, but also what we need to do globally. And so it's in that context that I think that we have to look at this decade of the 2020s, as really a key period to get the changes going, both on an economic sense, but also an energy sense as well, but also on a societal sense. And so these are going to be really difficult issues, and they're going to be difficult issues for each of our countries domestically, but also it's going to be a difficult challenge for for the collective people around the world. And so it's in that context that I look at the partnership that we have with such important allies like South Korea, and of course our other strong partners like Japan and Europe, and our counterpart in China, that we will have to engage on this as well. And so this is going to be a complicated period going forward. But I think that, like I said, we've got the foundation of long history of political, economic, security, energy partnership with Korea that I think puts us in a good place to look at things like technology innovation, look at things like assistance to developing countries so that they make the right development choices. And also, in that context, open up some commercial opportunities for our respective companies, which I think is going to be an area of great commercial opportunity going forward. And I think that there's going to be a really important partnership that we're going to have with Korea and with Japan as we contemplate how to engage China, both on China's activities domestically in the context of climate, as well as its activities in the Belt and Road Initiative. So I think that that's kind of how I see the map of things. I think that the President-elect Biden's signals early on in this transition period, as well as during the campaign, of how he's going to prioritize climate, both as a domestic policy as well as in his foreign policy, I think bodes well for us in getting a jump ahead in tackling these issues. I think that there's I'll talk about it maybe a little bit later on kind of how I see the potential for how the world and the United States deals with the COVID crisis as an opportunity that we can think about in kind of driving forward on what we need to do on climate change mitigation.
Thank you. Let me just remind the audience that this is an interactive discussion. So if you've got a question for either of the panelists, just click on the Q&A button and you can submit your question and we'll get to it. Ellen, let me stick with you just for a second. So the president-elect has announced that he intends to re-engage the U.S. in the Paris Climate Accords. Put on your hat as a Foreign Service officer again and kind of take us around the world. You did that a minute ago, a little bit with an allusion or a reference to some of these other countries. But could you go a little bit deeper in your analysis about how the rest of the world you think is going to respond? Will there be let me set up a dichotomy. On the one hand, there will be people that will say, terrific, this is absolutely fantastic. There will be others that will say, well, I don't know, maybe this is an opportunity for us to kind of turn the corner on the US because there is a little bit of suspicion about US as rule followers and other economies maybe not as rule followers. Could you speak to that, just particularly based on your experience in serving and representing the US around the world over these past couple decades?
Congressman Roskam, I think you framed the situation, very accurately. I think that there's going to be, and what I would say in your characterization is, it might be that there are not necessarily two groups that think that. There may be many people who think that and think those two ideas at the same time. So I think that there will be. I think there will be many parties out there who will be happy that the United States is back. But I think that, and there will be others who won't be happy about that. But I think that number is going to be small, that second group. I think the large part of the world is going to be happy that the United States is back and playing hopefully a leadership role in this. But there's going to be a lot of suspicion. There's going to be a lot of skepticism. We're going to have to kind of demonstrate that that we're serious, and also we're going to have to demonstrate that what we're saying and what we're planning to do has sustainability that that goes beyond an administration. And so I guess my hope is that as we kind of enter this new period, and as I mentioned, I think the 2020s are going to be a really important period for not just the United States, but really for all these countries around the world to make these strong changes in order to get us on the path that we need to be. So what I guess I would say is the President-elect Biden, as I mentioned earlier, I think has sent some encouraging and positive signals on how he's going to approach climate, particularly to an international audience. He, as everybody's probably seen, he announced his new national security team, a very impressive group of people with deep experience in government and foreign policy, and all of them recognizing the linkage of the U.S. national security and climate change, the implications of climate change to our U.S. national security, not just our diplomacy and our relations, but really why this is important for the greater good of our.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. And also you've seen he's received a series of phone calls from foreign leaders, congratulatory foreign leaders. And in each of them, he has initiated a conversation on climate change, which I think, again, is sending a signal to the world. And then finally, and probably most importantly, the creation, as Director General Chung mentioned, the creation of this new position of the Special Presidential Envoy on Climate Change, one, and then naming John Kerry to that position. I mean, for the United States, there's really no more prominent and important representative of climate change champion than him. So I think all of those things are going to be important signals. But then the important thing next is what are you going to do? Demonstrating how is it that the United States is really going to restore itself as a leader? And I think that there are 5 things that the administration needs to do. The first is the administration has to move out very promptly with a domestic plan on how it's going to achieve its goal of net zero emissions by 2050. We are not going to meet our commitment under Paris. I think that everybody recognizes that. But we do have to demonstrate seriousness to the world, as well as seriousness to the U.S. The U.S. Population of what it is that we're going to do. That's going to be important for our domestic audience. It's going to be important for our international audience. Number 2, the United States has to get back out there diplomatically on climate. Got to go back and really engage in the G7, in the G20, at APEC, and in a G20 and APEC, we're going to be really looking to South Korea as strong partners. We're going to have to do this at NATO and in other fora. And then we're going to need to engage really the key emitters, China, India, the EU, and Brazil, I think. The third one is we've got to get back in the game in working with developing countries where the greatest emissions growth is going to be happening. I mean, China obviously is a big actor in proportion. But if you're looking at growth trajectories, you're going to look at India, you're going to look at Southeast Asia, and you're going to look at Africa. And in all of those places, we need to partner with strong partners like South Korea to help to make sure that these countries are developing in a path that meets their needs, but also kind of achieves the global climate goals. And then the last 2, I would say, are US focused, international, but US focused. The fourth one is, I think we need to mobilize all of our US government agencies, particularly the State Department, the Pentagon, intelligence agencies, and USAID and others, and then working with key partner countries like our alliance partners like South Korea and Japan, research institutions, to really dig deep and understand, plan, and make changes to deal with the national security implications of climate change for our force readiness and also for addressing transnational challenges. And then the 5th one I would say is we need to start to get really smart about how we use trade and financial policy, US trade and financial policy, to push key governments to do more on climate ambition. I'll stop there and
that's helpful. Yeah, thank you. You took us around the world and you landed in Asia. So let me ask Director General, could you pick up on that? In other words, Alan laid out a number of the challenges and the opportunities. We know that some countries in Asia have had a hard time making commitments to decouple from fossil fuels for all the obvious reasons. What role will Korea be playing now with this shift in the U.S. administration, particularly as it relates to Asian partners, Japan and others, and the role to bring along some of the smaller Asian nations that have economies that are much smaller than than Korea? Director General?
Yes, Congressman Roskam. Well, I think what Mr. Yu just mentioned laid out some of the expectations that the countries in this region have with the new incoming administration. Yet, U.S. has to deliver. It has been 4 years since U.S. was in any of these bilateral, multilateral forums where we discussed this very issue. So yes, it remains to be seen. For Korea, Well, we only speak for ourselves, but we have we have a long way to go from our perspective to make good on our pledge for carbon neutrality by 2050. But we announced it, and so did China and Japan. Well, China had this goal by 2060, but I think they're headed to that path. So in that sense, we will try to engage with our neighbors first, and also with China and Japan. We also have another very important issue of air quality, which is very tied to the climate change. So that's something that we'll have to talk with China and Japan. We have been doing it, but we need more discussions and more actions. So in that sense, we'll be hopefully playing the facilitative role to engage with them. But well, there are also political dimensions. So with Japan, we have not looking at each other eye to eye for years over political issues, history issues. But I think the two administrations are approaching this with functional cooperation in such as environment or energy or other issues as a vehicle for us to do something while we also lay a conducive environment for more deep cooperation. So, well, I think that's all I can say for now.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful. So we've got a question from the audience. I'll read it, and then I'm going to put a little extra sort of covering on this. So Alan, this is coming your way, okay? Mm-hmm. So please give your opinion as to how changes in the political environment over the past 4 years have affected your view on this issue. Primarily, how can we have confidence that China will genuinely participate in resolving issues of climate, particularly given their aggressive military posture in Asia? Let me give a further caveat. So this is what we've seen in the United States in the past several years is a bipartisan shift in disposition towards China. And it goes back, you know, both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton during the 2016 campaign, they both said the U.S. needs to get out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Even though it wasn't a China thing, it was a China thing. And now you don't see much daylight between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. This is me opining now on China. You see a difference in rhetoric and sort of emphasis and tone, but there has been a fundamental shift over the past couple of years as the U.S. looks at China in Xinjiang with the Uyghurs, with its activity in Hong Kong, as the questioner posited, you know, aggression vis-a-vis South China Sea. So said another way, what is it that animates your hope that China would be a serious interlocutor on this and won't just manipulate this somehow to an economic advantage? What do you think, Alan?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hey, you know, I would say I completely agree with your analysis of where Washington is in that bipartisan view on China. I would say that, you know, at the Center for American Progress, which is a progressive organization, you are going to find uniform agreement with that assessment, that we need to be very clear and cold and clear-eyed about China's intentions, really kind of viewing our approach, our engagement with China, you know, through a U.S. national security and national interest lens. So there's no daylight, I would say, from my perspective on that. What I will say is that I think that as we engage China on climate, as we engage China across all of these other challenges, the human rights issues, Hong Kong trade, security, South China Sea, et cetera, I think we're going to have to be taking this again as a holistic approach and not as trade-off, not kind of chits in one area for advantages in the other. I think we're going to engage with China on climate, or we ought to engage with China on climate from that perspective as well. We're not going to go back. I don't see any U.S. interest in going back to kind of the approach that we took with China on climate in the lead up to the Paris Agreement. Not that I would say that that was a mistake at that point. I think it was actually the right approach at that point. But the situation, the geopolitical and the bilateral situation has changed since then, and there's no going back to that. So that I think is right. But I think that there is an importance in engaging China on climate. There's just no way that we're going to solve this crisis without engaging the world's greatest greenhouse gas emitter. And so the engagement can be on how we assess and discuss their policies, both domestically and their policies overseas and through their Belt and Road Initiative. I think that we can be sharing our views on how we see their domestic policy actions going. I think that if we're friendly or not friendly, we're the U.S. We can do that, and I think we will, and I think we should. I think that we still enjoy respect in China. I think in the context of how developed our economy is, how technically advanced we are in a position to be able to make assessments and make recommendations to them on their policy choices that I think they will listen to. On Belt and Road and their investments across the region, I think that's an opportunity again where the United States can be working with other partners like South Korea in particular, but also with Japan and also Australia, to offer alternatives to these countries, to offer the advanced technologies and hopefully improve financing to make these choices more inviting for them. I think that we also have the potential, as I alluded to earlier in my point on kind of the 5 tools that we need to be using. I think we should be looking at trade and finance tools as we engage China on climate. There's the tool of a potential carbon border adjustment mechanism in which countries that are exporting goods to the United States with higher carbon content and kind of making tariff adjustments to account for that, to maintain both U.S. industrial competitiveness as well as protecting the climate, is a tool that we should be looking at very closely. And it's a tool that would have, I think, pretty profound impacts on China and China trade. And for that reason, I think they're quite nervous about it. The European Union is considering that, and they're a little further along in their deliberations on that. And from what I've been hearing from some European Union colleagues, their Chinese counterparts are actually quite engaged in having a discussion about their concerns about that kind of mechanism.
Okay, that's helpful. Director General, let's shift gears a little bit. The phrase Green New Deal has gotten a lot of attention all over the globe. It means one thing in the United States. It means something else in China.